Please welcome to the stage Andreas Antonopoulos.
Wow. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon. Thank you so much. I'm afraid I cannot do this presentation in Polish. My Polish currently consists of one word, which I will probably mispronounce, which is dziękuję, and that's about it. So, thank you for having me here. It's really a pleasure. This is my first time in Poland. I've traveled all around Europe for some reason. I had not been to Poland before. I'm really enjoying my stay in Warsaw, and I'm really excited to be here for this particular event. So thank you so much to the organizers of this event for making it possible for me to visit Warsaw and to participate in this. The title of my presentation is The Future of Programmable Money, which is not the title of my presentation. It's what I set as the title of all my presentations because I don't decide what I'm going to talk about until maybe 2 hours before the presentation. So I'm going to be as surprised as the rest of you to find out exactly what we're going to be talking about today. I wanted to start by getting a bit of information about the audience. So unfortunately, I couldn't understand what Philip was saying before me. How many of you here own a cryptocurrency or have done at least one transaction at some point in your life? Everyone. Okay, good. So that's going to be easier for me. Then I won't need to explain what the hell is going on with cryptocurrencies. I can just jump into it. I want to talk today about communities and how we build interesting, exciting communities, both online and in person. I've traveled a lot in my life, and I've lived in many, many different places, and I find that I'm always attracted to a certain kind of neighborhood. I like to live in a place where there are a lot of artists, a lot of musicians. I like to live in neighborhoods that have weird little coffee shops and obscure bars where people play live music and you get to see bands and musicians and artists, places that have graffiti on the walls, perhaps places that, at least when I live in those places, they're not that safe, you know? They're still a bit dangerous. In fact, I often find myself living in neighborhoods where I'm the only white person in the neighborhood, or I'm the only non-local in the neighborhood. But those neighborhoods don't last. The artists, the musicians, the poor students, the people who are living in those neighborhoods love those neighborhoods too because rent is cheap, because the development of the neighborhood hasn't happened yet, because there's opportunities for expression, because with all of the weirdness and the not-so-safe environment, there's a lot of weird and creative people who come with that. Inevitably, when you stay in a neighborhood like that long enough, other people notice, and it starts becoming a cool neighborhood. And when it becomes a cool neighborhood, people who can afford to start moving into that neighborhood. And then richer and richer people start moving into that neighborhood. In a year or two, there's a Starbucks on the corner. The bar that had all of the weird and quirky musicians and the interesting places is replaced by a gallery or a boutique that sells a bit more upscale, more expensive clothes than before. And then the rents start going up. and the real estate property values start going up. Before long, the artists and the musicians and all of the interesting people who are the reason you move to that neighborhood, they can't afford to live there anymore. So they move. And eventually the neighborhood is full of young professionals wearing suits, going to work every morning, 9 to 5, with their Starbucks coffee in their hand, and they're very busy and they're on their phone, and that neighborhood is now shit. And you leave. And you go to find a cool neighborhood again. And the cycle repeats. Gentrification is the word we use in the United States to describe that phenomenon. Turns out that all of the things that make a neighborhood interesting, all of the quirky and weird people, they don't stay very long. And if you like to live in that environment, an environment that is full of creativity and expression, the worst thing that can happen to that environment is commoditification, corporatization, marketing. Because when you have something cool like that, if you take something that is cool and authentic and you turn it into a marketing campaign for Coca-Cola or Nike, it's not cool anymore, right? By the time they think it's cool, it's not cool anymore. And it ruins the authenticity. And the money starts pouring in, and all of the authenticity is gone. I first went online and participated in digital communities in the middle of the 1980s. And in order to participate in those digital communities, I had to buy a modem and I had to dial into a bulletin board system. And this bulletin board system was run by some person in their basement as a hobby. And it had maybe 150 participants in it who were all just as weird as I was. A weird 15-year-olds who had modems, who other people didn't understand. And we had such a good time having conversations online. And then towards the end of the 90s, bulletin board systems started getting popular. And big companies started buying the smaller operators. And they started advertising. And they started charging membership fees. And then they started to polish and improve the content. They started to try to make it a bit more palatable for mainstream. Watch your language. Don't say bad words. Only things for adults. Let's keep this family friendly. And all of the interesting and weird people who made the bulletin board system interesting in the first place start looking for somewhere else to have their conversations because they're not welcome anymore. And in some cases, because they can't afford to participate anymore. And all of the creative conversation that was the reason we went there in the first place is now gone. In fact, one of the weird things about these bulletin board systems in those days was it was all guys. At the time, there were no women participating in online bulletin board systems in 1985, but the corporations tried to convert these bulletin board systems into dating sites. So what they did is they had guys pretend to be women so they could attract more customers. So you find yourself in a situation where you're having a conversation with another guy whose online name is Helen, in order to sell more subscription to the bulletin board system. Marketing. The funny thing was, there were a few women online at that time. They were using guys' names so they could feel more comfortable and less freaked out by weirdos. And they had the fake Helen talking to them and fake flirting to get them to pay more subscription. By that time, I had already moved on to Usenet, and Usenet was a group discussion that was happening across all of the internet at the time, towards the end of the 1980s. It was a text-based community where you could exchange messages with anyone around the world who was on the internet, which at the time was maybe 500,000 people. And Usenet was weird, like very, very weird. In fact, there was a special corner of Usenet called the alt groups, the alternative groups, that you couldn't access in all places, but where you could access them, that was the special place. That's where all of the Dungeons and Dragons fans, and all of the comic book fans, and all of the weird sci-fi fans, and a lot of the sex, and weird hobbies, and just generally people who didn't fit well into other groups were in the alt groups. And then the corporations came. And they started carrying Usenet as a subscription service. And the first thing they dropped was the alt groups. So now you could pay to get the clean version of Usenet, but you couldn't get the alt groups because those weren't very polite at times. They weren't very corporate. They weren't very clean. So they took Usenet with all of its weirdness and all of its quirkiness, and they dressed it in a suit, and they cut its hair, and it became boring. And so all of the interesting people moved on. And then the web happened. And with the web, we had this explosion of creativity and expression. And at first, all of the websites were weird, right? Too many colors, blinking tags, fonts, everything looked terrible, no sense of design. But the conversations you could have and the creativity and the weird people you could meet, it was fantastic. And then the corporations came in, and they polished everything and cleaned it up. No bad words on this site. This is moderated content. And CompuServe and AOL came along, and they built curated environments which were protected from all of the dirty words and all of the weird people. Gentrification in waves across the internet, our digital domain being gentrified just like neighborhoods get gentrified. And every cycle of gentrification, the same result. The people who went there, who made that place interesting, no longer welcome, can't afford to participate, not allowed to speak. And so they leave. And all of the reasons why you joined in the first place are no longer there. Many of the people who left all of those curated environments went to other parts of the web and started their own websites and independent communities. And then Web 2.0 happened. And when Web 2.0 happened, we started getting the Facebooks, or maybe MySpace, then Facebook, and the other social media sites. And they very carefully curate the content. You can post Nazi messages on Facebook and get away with it for a while. God help you if you show a female breast. Oh no, we can't have that. It's a family environment. Don't say bad words. Carefully curated, lots of marketing, very polished. And all of the interesting people leave. And now, if you still have a Facebook account, it's so you can see photos of your grandchildren. In fact, kids don't want to be on Facebook. And the reason they don't want to be on Facebook is their parents are there. And so they leave. And they go to Reddit and 4chan. Gentrification. Bitcoin was weird. And I really, really loved Bitcoin when it was weird. But for some people, Bitcoin was too weird. Maybe difficult to understand. And there's a small possibility that you could buy drugs with Bitcoin. But not the good drugs, right? Not the drugs made by Pfizer that cost a lot of money, right? Not Adderall, which is methamphetamine, not fentanyl, which is heroin, not prescription good drugs, bad drugs, like marijuana. And people could buy drugs and they could do other things that were not very good for the corporate image. So how do you gentrify a currency? How do you take something that is weird and dress it up in a suit, give it a haircut, and present it to the board of executives? I remember in the first few years, I'd go to companies and they'd ask me to come and present. And they would say to me, "We want you to talk to our executives. But when you talk to our executives, if you could, please say blockchain. Don't say Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is weird, and blockchain is the future." And I said, "No, I won't say blockchain. I will say Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the future, and blockchain is bullshit. And I'll also say bullshit to your executives because you paid me to come here to tell you the truth as I see it. And I'm not going to try to sell you something that's nicely packaged just to avoid offending. I'm interested in telling the truth. And the reason cryptocurrencies are interesting, the reason Bitcoin is interesting, is because it's not controlled, because it can't be censored, because it's open, because a lot of the people involved are very, very weird. Weird computer geeks, weird cryptographers who have weird ideas about privacy and freedom. And these weird people are why I'm involved in Bitcoin. Because I'm weird too, and that's okay. And if you take all of that out, what you're left with, this blockchain, is a sterile, unexpressive, uninvented environment, a corporate plaything that has been sanitized of everything interesting and left as an empty shell. It's basically a very slow database. If someone comes to you and says, "Do I need a blockchain for my business?" Ask them, do you need something that is open, neutral, borderless, that no one controls, and that resists censorship? If yes, then you need Bitcoin, or Ethereum, Monero, Zcash, some open public blockchain, cryptocurrency system that expresses these capabilities. But if you don't need something that's open, borderless, neutral, censorship resistant, and not controlled by anyone, what you're really asking for is a database. So install a database. You don't need a blockchain. And if you take all of the weird people out, with them goes all of the innovation, all of the interesting developments. If what you try to do is make business as usual, only now with blockchain, if the whole purpose of introducing this technology, say, into your bank, is to be able to not change anything about how you do business, or if your government says, we will do a digital currency, and we heard that there's a digital currency using blockchain that is open, decentralized, borderless, censorship resistant, and neutral, and we want to do just that, except we don't want it to be open, decentralized, censorship-resistant, neutral, or borderless. We'd like that, but we want it to be controlled within our borders with the ability to control who has access to it with full censorship, and we ultimately decide who has power on this system, also known as a database. And you can build that, and it will be boring. And all of the innovation, and all of the excitement, and all of the reason why I'm interested in these technologies, and perhaps why some of you are interested in these technologies, is precisely because they're weird, precisely because they're different, because they're open, because they allow everyone to innovate and express themselves creatively in ways that we don't anticipate, in ways that are completely unpredictable, and in some ways that are offensive to some. That's okay. I don't want to live in a world of pastel colors, carefully curated advertising, marketing-focused tested phrases where you can't say the bad words. I want to live in a world with color, with creativity, with variety, with diversity, with ideas that sometimes offend me and scare me, that I don't understand, with weird people around me who are free to express themselves, because that's where creativity comes from. And it's not just Bitcoin. We're going to see this happen again and again. We've already gone through the phase where people said, yes, I'm interested in blockchain, but not Bitcoin. When someone tells you, I'm interested in blockchain, but not Bitcoin, what they say is, I don't understand. I don't understand. Or they've heard someone else say it, and they think they can be cool if they say that, right? It's a bit like someone saying, MySpace is so last year. I'm into Facebook now. It happened to Bitcoin, but it's going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening to every cryptocurrency that dares to do something interesting. Right now, the big banks, governments, they're in love with Ethereum. They love the fact that Ethereum has all of these capabilities that seem much, much less weird than Bitcoin. But they don't realize that all of the weirdness is still there. I love the weirdness in Ethereum because, quite honestly, the whole point of Ethereum is to make unstoppable code, applications that you cannot turn off. And the reason you can't turn them off is because they're decentralized apps, dApps. Why make a dApp unless you wanted to make a dApp that somebody wants to turn off and you want it to continue working? The whole point of an uncensorable application is so you can write applications that are offensive to some people. So people are going to write applications for Ethereum that are going to be offensive. Probably offensive to everyone in this room. Maybe a bit offensive, maybe a lot offensive. Drug markets that cannot be shut down. Sex markets that cannot be shut down. In fact, all of the interesting applications that you can do in a decentralized, neutral, unstoppable environment for code are precisely applications that somebody wants to stop. And those are even more powerful in the countries where the people who want to stop them are in power. If I'm in Russia and I want to put something on Ethereum, I'm going to put a Pussy Riot application, just so I can annoy Putin. Can't stop it. In Korea, they had a problem with sexual assault at campuses, and the academic institutions tried to shut up the victims of sexual assault. So they put their stories on the Ethereum blockchain so that they couldn't be censored. Any speech worth speaking offends someone. Oscar Wilde said, speaking the truth that somebody wants you not to publish is journalism. Everything else is marketing. At some point in the next couple of years, Someone's going to write a weird application on Ethereum, and the big banks and all of the organizations that today are absolutely enamored with Ethereum are going to go running to the Ethereum Foundation and to the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, and they're going to say, hey, we'd like you to stop this. And the Ethereum Foundation is going to say, most likely, no, we won't. Or better yet, we can't. Submit your Ethereum improvement proposal, and let's see what the community thinks. Hey, community, do you want to stop this application because JP Morgan Chase doesn't like it? No? Oops. Or maybe they decide to stop it. And then we get another hard fork, and then we have 3 Ethereums. Ethereum, Ethereum Classic, and Ethereum Uncensored. Because you can't stop these things. All you can do is fork away a bullshit corporate version, but the other one continues to run. And then what do you have? And that's the moment you suddenly realize this is the first time we have a digital community that can't be gentrified. You can plant your Starbucks on the corner, but you can't kick out the weirdos. And if you try to kick out the weirdos, we fork it and we take the neighborhood with us. The weirdos own this neighborhood for the first time ever, and they can't be kicked out. And that's beautiful. That's what this is all about. For the first time, we now have digital communities that can't be taken over, polished, sanitized, sterilized of any idea worthwhile, and turned into a plaything for Disney, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and JP Morgan Chase to shit all over the creativity and turn it into nothing, into empty marketing slogans. For the first time, we have digital communities that can't be gentrified. And so, when people ask me, why are you excited about cryptocurrencies? Aren't they weird? I say, yes. They're weird. They're beautifully weird. That's why I'm interested in them. So, my pledge, and the pledge of all of the other people who are in this because it's weird, is keep it weird. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. We do have some time for questions, so I hope we have a microphone that can go to people.
Yeah, we have a microphone.
Oh, very good. Fantastic. Yes.
So we are ready. Okay.
Thank you. I'm a YouTuber. I've tokenized myself a year ago. And yeah, I have a few hundred holders. I'm traded onto exchanges. I have some significant market cap. But I'm tokenizing more people. And
Yes.
I believe that tokenizing people might be a new way of creating a new economy and generating a flow of capital inside the crypto space.
Yes.
What do you think about that? Do you perceive any blockade, or maybe this idea is stupid in the first place? What do you think about that?
I think it's interesting. The first time somebody asked me if I could publish Andreas coin was sometime in 2013. And in fact, one of the first people who created an artist coin is a friend of mine, and I was involved in that project. I've predicted that people will have tokens, and that tokens are, among other things, a means of expression. It's a way to express loyalty and to be a fan, to be a supporter. And it's also a way to offer patronage for creative people. so that you can support artists and creative people so they can be as expressive as they want, and they don't have to look for corporate sponsors. They can be directly responsive to their audience. Another reason why I think tokenization is important is because when you work through a platform like YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, you don't own the relationship with your audience. YouTube owns it. Twitter owns it. Right now, for example, I can't do advertising on Facebook for my book because my book has a dirty word in it, right? And the dirty word isn't Lockheed Martin. The dirty word is Bitcoin. And so I can't advertise Mastering Bitcoin, my own book, a scientific college-level textbook on Facebook, because they will ban my account. Not only will they ban my account, they will disconnect me from my audience. And the same thing applies on all of the other platforms. I keep a very good backup of all of my videos because I don't trust YouTube. Tomorrow, they could shut down my account. And how do I connect with my audience? I think tokenization is important. There's one difficulty with it today. And the difficulty is that there are very few people who own cryptocurrencies. We're still in the very early stages, which means that you have a small audience that you can reach. My work is focused 95% at least on people who are brand new to cryptocurrencies, people who have never used them before. My audience is all newbies. That's my particular focus. And so 95% of my audience don't own any cryptocurrencies yet. They're getting some now, maybe. They're getting involved. They're in the beginning. They're trying to learn, trying to make that first tentative step, which means they can't support me if I tokenize myself. So I use commercial platforms. So I use Patreon, for example. And Patreon allows them to use a credit card to support me, which is easier for most people who are not yet into cryptocurrencies. And that makes me feel a bit uncomfortable because Visa is taking part of that and because Patreon is a centralized service. But what is the alternative? At least for me, the alternative is corporate sponsorship. So the freedom I get by getting directly funded by my biggest supporters and by my audience is tremendous. It's fantastic. I'm here today because of Patreon. It allows me to do smaller conferences like this without a lot of commercial sponsors so that I can do that. So I think it's a great idea. I think we're going to see more and more and more of that as the years go by. In fact, I think that's one of the greatest opportunities for cryptocurrencies. You see, the whole peer-to-peer thing is about changing the connection between people. Any one of you in this room today, if you want to give money to another person in this room, you have two choices. You either give them cash, which is peer-to-peer, or you have to pay them through some kind of digital currency, other system, except for cryptocurrency, that is. Let's say you use a credit card or you use a bank account transfer. And that's not person to person. That's person to corporation to corporation to corporation to person. Who invited them? Who invited those three corporations into my human interaction, my commerce with one other person? And so the great thing about being an artist and using tokens and cryptocurrencies is that you disinvite the 5 corporations that want to join the party and their 2% commission they take for doing nothing, right? And you connect directly with your audience. I think that's fantastic. I think that's the future. Let's see if we have another question. Thank you.
Hi, Tomek Śnieski. I would like to ask you, how do you think the old-fashioned financial system will adapt to the changes caused by the development of cryptocurrencies?
Poorly. I think the traditional financial system will adapt the same way the traditional telecommunication system has adapted, the same way the horse and carriage industry adapted to the automobile. How many people in this room own a horse? No? Not yet. Maybe as a hobby, but you certainly won't use it to go to work every day, right? So I think the idea of having a fixed relationship with a centralized institution that holds your money for you is going to be one of those obscure, weird, elitist things that weird old rich people do. So they'll have a personal relationship with their banker, which is ironic because they're the only people who have a personal relationship with their banker to start with. But in the end, they'll be the only people left who have that personal relationship, because all of the rest of us are going to be debanked. So I don't think the financial industry is going to adapt very well. And it's not because bad people work for banks. That's not the case. Great people work for banks. And the greatest of those great people who work for banks are going to quit working for banks and do a startup in the cryptocurrency space. Because they spend the first couple of years trying to persuade everyone around them that, hey, I've seen the future. It's not this. This system you've put together from 70s technology with COBOL to a mainframe that tries to do things and is slow, inefficient, and insecure, this is the past. I've seen the future. And they'll try and try and try and try to persuade. But the problem with large centralized institutions like traditional financial services is they have inertia. They're organizationally sclerotic. As a result, they can't change. Even if a lot of the people inside them want to change, even if they know that not changing is the end, they're simply going to try and delay the inevitable because they're unable to change. This is the nature of large organizations. And so as the creative and interesting people inside these corporations try to persuade that they've seen the future, eventually they get tired. And they say, you know what? I'm going to leave and start a startup. I'm going to actually pursue the dream because I really understand that this is the future. And since nobody here understands me, I'll just take it elsewhere. But the best part about it is they're going to do that in January. And they're going to fund their startup with the bonus they got in December. So they can turn around and compete with the very company that gave them the bonus in the first place. And we will welcome them. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I wanted to ask, how did your attitude to Bitcoin evolve? I mean, you are the huge proponent of Bitcoin for so many years. And is it the same? Do you have still the same hope like on the beginning? How did it evolve?
Yeah, I'm still just as enthusiastic and excited about this technology. My vision is broader now. It's not just Bitcoin anymore. There's many exciting projects. And I look at this entire space as growing and expanding. And it's not only expanding in depth with technology innovation and improvements. Bitcoin isn't what it was 5 years. It's getting better. It's getting more technologically advanced. The rate of innovation is accelerating, the number of people who are developing. And then just as Bitcoin's getting better, the whole space is getting broader, and new projects, exciting projects, doing their own different style of innovation, but still open, borderless, decentralized systems that allow lots of people to participate and have a little dose of weirdness are sprouting up all over the place. And some of them are more focused on privacy, others are more focused on other technologies, and they're all innovating independently. So now I look more broadly at the space. And I'm very excited with the level of technological innovation that's happening. And I'm even more optimistic than I was before. The first 2, maybe 3 years, I had the hope that this could work. But at the same time, I had a bit of doubt in the back of my head. Every day I'm like, oh, I hope it works out. I don't know, things are looking weird today. I don't know if it's going to work. Oh shit, MTGOX went bankrupt. Oh no, they're banning it here, or they're banning it there. And I was worried. But what I've seen over time is that with each challenge, the system, the technology, the community, the the environment, the companies in the space, the people working, they work harder. They get creative. They find ways around the obstacles. They improve the things that are broken and make new things that are better. And it just keeps getting stronger. And every time I think, oh, things are very difficult right now, back in 2012, 2013, 2014 was very depressing. And I was worried. And then I keep seeing it getting stronger and stronger and stronger. I really can't see how it is possible to stop this now. I've gotten to the point where I don't believe it is possible to stop this. It's gotten too big, it's gotten too advanced, it's gotten too many people involved. It's funny, sometimes people tell me, but the price will go to zero. Like, no, it won't. It won't go to zero. I'll tell you why. Because if the price went to 1,000th of a dollar, I'd buy all 21 million Bitcoin in existence myself. I mean, for that price. So I can tell you the price isn't zero, if you just want to talk about price, but for me, the price is 0.001. It's not going below that, because at that point, I'm buying all of them. Now, if I know I'm thinking that way, I know at least a few other people who will do the same. And so when you understand that regardless of the price, regardless of the economic activity, regardless of the market fit, there is a real technology here. And it's an evolving technology that's actually getting better over time. And the fundamentals are getting more and more robust. And then you look outside of that, and you look at government debt, and you look at traditional currencies, and you look at mismanagement, and you look at coercive and oppressive governments around the world. And you realize if we keep doing this just a tiny bit better, or just keep it the same, and they keep fucking up, every time they do that, there's a new market to address, right? We weren't talking about Venezuela in 2013. We are now. We're talking about Argentina again. Welcome to the club. Greece, Cyprus, Italy, southern Spain, Portugal, half of South America, almost all of Asia. We are very close to saying, welcome to the club, because this technology continues to get stronger. Traditional centralized systems keep getting more and more fragile. In fact, I liked recently, I've always advised people, don't invest your life savings in this currency. You should have a smart approach that involves diversifying and taking small risks, but not crazy risks. Don't go all in. I was contradicted recently by someone who said, don't invest more than you are willing to lose in US dollars. And I thought that was an interesting perspective, because you don't really think that if you hold your money in zloty, that's a foolish investment. Maybe you should. And I'm not saying take it all out of zloty and put it into Bitcoin, but diversification works both ways. If all of your money is in one national currency, that's not prudent. It's irresponsible. It's irresponsible to your family. It's irresponsible to your future. It's like, I don't know if I want to take that much risk. So I'm 100% invested in the Polish government for the next 30 years. They've changed a lot in the last 30 years. I know I wouldn't do that for the Greek government. Oh, hell no. And I certainly won't do it for the American government. You know what I mean? Orange Benito. All right. So I'm increasingly optimistic, and my spirit continues to be enthusiastic. And most importantly, I find myself learning something new every day and discovering some new innovation and new technology every single day. It never gets boring in this space.
Hi.
Hello.
Since Bitcoin is different, how do you see the mainstream adoption, and is it going to be through Bitcoin or maybe something else which can be censored?
Well, I don't think mainstream adoption is going to be mainstream adoption of one thing. And I think that's a mistake. The idea that everybody will suddenly stop using their national currency and start using only Bitcoin in replacement, I think that's the wrong mentality. We're going from a world of one choice, backed by a monopoly, often a monopoly of force, and with the corruption that comes with that, to a world of choice, where you can have the ability to use any one of perhaps thousands of currencies, and you can easily switch from one to the other in a matter of milliseconds with very little friction, very little exchange cost. So why would you commit to one currency? You would use whatever is most convenient for the particular thing you're trying to do today. Just like, arguably, your IP packets will use the route that's most efficient to getting to the final destination. If you had to set up your internet routing so that it always followed a certain path, it wouldn't be very robust. Instead, that decision is made 1,000 times a second, and you don't even think about it. When money turns into data and money becomes routable, we start thinking of money in that way. The decision, which currency am I committed to, is a decision made by my digital wallet 1,000 times a second as needed. Depends who I'm paying. Depends whether my wallet decides that the savings rate and store value capacity of one currency is better right now and invests some there. It depends on the risk setting I've set, maybe. Who knows? These are all exciting areas to explore. The idea that mainstream will pick one currency is a fiction of the past. The only reason most of us only use one currency is because the switching costs are enormous, especially when you have a government monopoly backing it and you have restrictions on currency exchanges. Otherwise, it's an unnatural state of affairs. What's your favorite food? Sorry? Apples. Okay, from now until the rest of your life, you will only eat apples. Not your favorite food anymore. Why would you do just one? Why pick just one? So the idea that we have just one currency and can only use one currency is primarily because of artificial restrictions. I want to have a buffet of currencies. I want to be able to go back to the buffet and refill my plate with something different. And every day try something new. I want some variety. Maybe if I'm trading with some people, I want one currency, maybe another currency. And some of those currencies are going to be censorship focused, right? Just like today, you have the opportunity to use any website in the world. And you have friends who only use Facebook, right? That's the choice they've made. Is it a good choice? For them it is. But at least they have that choice. And the funny thing about that is because they have that choice, they also have the choice to leave. And if you've been around the computing environment as long as I have, you learn that nothing lasts forever. I used to think that Microsoft would dominate computers forever. Right? Where are they now? They don't get to dictate choices. We're going to see a lot of variation. Some people will make poor choices. They'll use currencies with surveillance and control and censorship. You know who those people are? The people who can afford to do that. And the reason they can afford to do that is because their government is not corrupt yet. Because if you go to Argentina or Venezuela and you say, hey, would you like to use the government money? No one wants to use that money. And the reason is they know. They already know how expensive that choice will be. Not just expensive as in you lose part of your salary, expensive as in you lose the future of your children. And so that's a choice they will not make at all. But, you know, if you're an American, if you're German, maybe if you're Polish, and you have a Visa, and you can use that in every store, and it's easy and uncomplicated. Is anybody censoring your transactions right now? Not really. Is anyone confiscating your money? Well, if you're Greek, yes. But if you're Polish, not yet. Right? So that's a lesson you will learn when it becomes necessary to learn that lesson. The end result is you will have systems that are fragile competing against systems that are robust. You will have systems that can be debased through inflation competing against systems that cannot be debased. You will have systems that can be censored competing against systems that cannot be censored. And some people will make the right choice, and some people won't, and that's okay. Not everyone needs it. I know which choice I'm going to make. To me, the only important thing is, can I make that choice? And if I can make that choice and I'm the only one making that choice, that's okay too. I'm used to being weird. Who else?
Hi,
Philip.
Hi, Andreas. I was talking, and you are also always talking about adoption.
Yes.
So I was talking to our audience also about adoption, that we need to work on that adoption in our local communities. That all of them need to work for adoption in the local to make it more global. Maybe you can give all of us some advice how to work on adoption in the proper way with the Bitcoin, of course.
I have a slightly different perspective on mainstream adoption than many of the people who are in this space. Some people believe that in order to get mainstream adoption, you have to go out there and you have to advertise and promote and basically tell people to use these technologies, that you have to persuade people to use this technology, that you have to go into every store and say, do you accept Bitcoin? No, I'm not buying anything from you, ha, and walk out. You're going to get very hungry if you do that. And very soon you won't have too many friends. They'll be like, hey man, we're going to the party next week. Hey, did anyone invite Philip? Oh, no. All he does is talk about Bitcoin all the time. Have you been there? I've been there. I think it's important to recognize that not everybody needs this technology. Also, the technology is not ready for everyone. It's still difficult to use. It's difficult to secure. It's difficult to operate in a convenient way. The user interfaces are very poor. It requires a very high level of technical understanding and expertise to operate, even more so to operate securely. And so, why do you need it in your life? Maybe you have this particular balance of skill and need, and it's right for you today. But maybe it's not right for your friend. Maybe it won't be right for another 5 years. Maybe the zloty has to go to shit before it's right for them. Right? You know, I went to Greece in 2010, after the crisis, and I told people, you really should look into Bitcoin, it's important. Nobody listened. Now I go, everybody wants to know about Bitcoin. Yeah. Give it 8 years of economic recession, and suddenly everybody's interested in sound money. Everybody becomes a monetary economist. The secret about money is that you can ignore it if it works. The moment it stops working, you cannot ignore it. It's everywhere. It ruins everything. And so there are some countries in the world today where it's needed. There are some applications today where it's needed. If you meet an immigrant who's a taxi driver, who sends money to their family in Kuwait, in Jordan, in the Sudan, in any other country like that, in Mexico, whatever, and they currently use Western Union, and it costs them a minimum of $5 to $10 to do a wire transfer, and it takes 3 to 5 business days, and they give them a terrible exchange rate, yeah, maybe they need this technology. Maybe they could do something better. But your average Polish person who's shopping, they don't need it. So you have to be careful. First of all, don't promise things you can't deliver, right? Don't tell people, oh, this is miracle money, it will always be free, fast, and secure, and it's so easy to use. It's not. Don't try to push it on people who have no interest in playing with your little weird experiment. We don't need to invite everyone into the neighborhood yet. I think the most important thing is to look within your community at the people who came to cryptocurrencies for the wrong reasons. And that's okay. A lot of us got into cryptocurrencies, maybe some for the right reasons, maybe some for the wrong reasons, right? You all have this friend who you've been telling about Bitcoin since 2015. You're like, hey, good price right now, maybe you should get involved. They're like, oh no, that's stupid internet money, I'm not buying into your scam. And then they call you in December of 2017, and they're like, my friend, you're the Bitcoin guy, tell me, how do I get some? You're like, now? You want to buy now at 19,000? No, don't, go away. Come back in 6 months. Right? You've all been part of this conversation. Suddenly everybody's like, oh, Bitcoin, 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 Bitcoin. Or Ethereum, Ethereum. Or they want the whole spectrum. You've got your friend who you told about this again and again and again and again. Finally, in 2017, they go buy a bunch of Bitcoin at $19,000. And then they go day trading for the next 2 weeks. And they call you up and they say, hey, I've heard that Sia, Tron, and Neo are about to break out from the pennies into major market cap. I'm trying to trade Neo for Sia on Poloniex, but I'm having some problems with my author. And you're like, what the hell are you doing? Right? They've gone full casino. Who has a friend like that? Who are calling you now and asking, I'm not being nasty about these particular cryptocurrencies. There's 2,000 cryptocurrencies out there, and they're calling you up and they're asking you about these. And you're like, what? Or worse, they go full pyramid scheme. And they go, oh yeah, man, I heard you. I heard about this Bitcoin and I got so excited, and now I've invested my entire retirement in BitConnect. Like, oh shit. Oops. So there's a time, and then there's a wrong time. And then there's a way to address this topic. And the way is not to try to tell people what is the right choice, because you don't know what the right choice is. You think you do, I think I do, but if I start advising people and say, I think you should buy now or sell now or buy this or sell that, I'm going to be wrong on average, more often than I'm right, and in the end, people are going to be very disappointed. What you need to do is help people make their own choices by educating them, right? Okay, so some of the rules apply to everything. For example, don't put all of your investments into one thing. That's smart advice, yes? Don't try to be a day trader unless you're a day trader. Okay, because you will lose everything. That's smart advice. Other advice, if you see something that promises guaranteed daily returns of 10%, it's a Ponzi scheme. And then when your friend says, it can't be a Ponzi scheme, I've been making so much money, you're like, that's why it's a Ponzi scheme. The first people always make so much money. You can advise people to be careful of frauds. You can advise people that this space does have, unfortunately, a lot of scams in it, right? There's things that are based on real technology, and then there's things that are wrapped in a cloud of ever-changing bullshit that's swirling so fast you don't know what to check first. And so you get lost in it. You can educate people on the basics. How do I keep my currency secure? Why should I have a wallet where I control the keys versus just leaving all my money on a third-party exchange? Why should I not use a web wallet? How do I back up my wallet? How do I save my seed? This is basic education, right? So what you should do is give basic education, not on what to choose, but on how to understand which choices make sense and which don't. And the great news is this. Of all of the people who just arrived, and there's always 100 new people who just arrived, they just heard about it in the last 6 months. Most of them came for the wrong reason. Most of them came because of greed and excitement about the current price spike. Some of them will stay. And those who will stay, if you help educate them on best practices, if you help them learn how to use this as part of their life, to learn skills that will help them in their career, to learn how to interact with other people and to bring them into the community, you've built the next generation. We're going to have another bubble. And when we have another bubble, a whole bunch of newbies are going to come in, and then most of them are going to leave as soon as the price crashes, and then you catch a few more. And you keep repeating that. So don't try to sell this too hard. I think the first thing you should accept, this is not for everyone. Not everyone needs cryptocurrency. Not everyone needs cryptocurrency now. Not everyone is ready to understand cryptocurrency. Not everyone is ready to use cryptocurrency, and it's okay. That's okay. Otherwise, you're the asshole who is pushing something that people don't need and don't want in order to promote, really, your own greed, right? And in fact, you should be very careful when you see people like that in the community who are trying to persuade people to buy into the latest exciting investment. Those people are toxic to community, and you need to be very, very careful. So hopefully that's some advice that you can put to practice here. Communities that are based on education are sustainable, are long-lasting, and they keep growing regardless of what the price does. I've seen this again and again. I've been involved in founding several physical communities, local communities in San Francisco and Chicago and other places, and I've seen those communities thrive. They get very busy when the price is high, but they remain sustainable even when it's not. All right. Do we have time for, how many questions more do you want to do? Couple more? 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Very good. Thank you.
Hi, Andreas.
Hello.
You told us that Bitcoin is getting stronger when it gets attacked.
Yes.
It has antibodies that make it stronger, and even the hardest threats seem to make it just grow better. Do you think there are threats that are maybe not so sophisticated, not so scary, but for which Bitcoin is less prepared to react? Something that maybe can be subtle or can be technical, social, something that can be unexpectedly toxic or unhealthy for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I do think those do exist. I think for the most part we've seen a number of social attacks against Bitcoin, which are attacks against the community and attempts to create unnecessary drama that distracts people from the real focus, right? So one of the things that I think has become clear is that one of the ways to slow cryptocurrency down is to create drama inside the communities. And that has been attempted. And I would say in some ways it has been successful. Hasn't stopped us, but it has slowed us down. So I try not to feed the drama. I think it's important to remain focused on the technology and to stop paying attention to the people. Because the more you spend time, if you're talking about people, that's gossip. It's not technology, right? So don't ignore the personalities. Focus on the technology. Focus on what's actually happening in this space, because that's real. It's not fake drama. But quite honestly, one of the ways in which Bitcoin has changed is that it's not just Bitcoin anymore, which means that even if an attack was successful against one cryptocurrency, all that will do is create other cryptocurrencies now. Because all of these cryptocurrencies are all trying different approaches, different communities, different focus, different applications, different code base, different monetary policies, different security principles. That's diversity. That diversity, like biological diversity, means that we're much more resistant to any single type of attack, because even if it manages to stop one part, it doesn't stop everything. And in fact, the parts that are not stopped expand to fill the ecosystem, right, and get stronger. So now we've got this adaptation to threats. It's not just Bitcoin that is anti-fragile. It's the entire crypto ecosystem with all of its competing interests and competing developers and competing models that is advancing as a whole, and it is even more unstoppable than Bitcoin itself. So again, I find it harder and harder to come up with realistic scenarios of how this gets stopped. I really do. All right, let's see another question. Yes?
Hi. I'm just wondering, let's say that 5% of people of the total population get out of their comfort zone and they move to, for example, crypto.
Okay.
And I just wonder, when do you think that this gentrification will come? That, you know, this mainstream, let's say, user-friendliness of a crypto community will come, then you say, okay, this is gentrified, I'm going out of here because it's too user-friendly for me.
Well, it's already happening, right? It's already happening. And at the moment, it's primarily the things that people call blockchain, enterprise blockchain, blockchain proof of concept, blockchain alliance, blockchain project. You know, we're using blockchain to do blockchain, 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 blockchain. And yes, this week is Consensus Week in New York, Blockchain Week in New York. I must have forgotten to go there. I came here instead. And they're going to say that word a lot. Yes, gentrification is already happening. The attempt to wrap all of this in a sanitized corporate environment. But the brilliant thing about it is that that doesn't take away the core principles and values anymore. They've built their own little neighborhood. And it's boring. And they're doing their own little thing. And the consultants are making fantastic money, right? The funny thing is, and I predicted this in 2013, I suggested that what's going to happen is they're going to start blockchain projects. They're going to take these blockchain projects and they're going to have funding. And for this funding, they're going to train software developers to work on blockchain. And how are they going to train software developers to work on blockchain? They might buy my book. They might go and do some courses online. They'll start learning from the existing code base. They're going to copy some of the existing code. They're going to learn cryptography fundamentals. They're going to learn about elliptic curves. They're going to learn about private-public keys. They're going to learn about hash algorithms. They're going to learn about consensus algorithms. They're going to learn about proof of work. And one day, one of these developers is going to discover Bitcoin. And people thought that was funny, right? Like, I mean, come on, how can they possibly do that? So I went to this conference in Singapore, and me and Vitalik Buterin were there, both doing a presentation for the Singapore meetup. And this kid, this young kid, maybe he was in his 20s, like not even mid-20s, came up to me and said, Mr. Antonopoulos, I've been watching your videos. I've been in the blockchain space for a year and a half. And a couple of months ago, I discovered Bitcoin. What? How? How can you be in the blockchain space for a year and a half and discover Bitcoin in the last 2 months? He said, well, I went to this Bank of America conference presentation, and there was a consultant who was talking about this new technology called blockchain. And they talked about blockchain, they talked about Hyperledger, and they talked about Ripple, and they talked about distributed ledger technology, and they talked about federated ledgers, and they talked about proof of authority and proof of stake and all of that, And they didn't say Bitcoin once. It wasn't on the slides. And so then I got hired and I got involved in this project and I started working with Hyperledger. And I started reading, but every time I would search for one of the things that I was interested in, it would send me into these weird open source communities on GitHub, and I'd find things about other things that I'd never heard of. And then I started noticing that Bitcoin came up a lot. I was like, what's the relationship between blockchain and Bitcoin? Does Bitcoin use blockchain too? And this entire time, I'm sitting there and I'm, really? Uh-huh. And then what happened? Really? Uh-huh. And I'm like inside, I'm screaming, right? But I'm listening to this guy. It's like, and then I discovered your videos and I started watching them. And now I'm really excited about Bitcoin, so I came here to learn about Bitcoin. And I'm like, oh, this is it. Because the beauty of that is Bank of America paid to train this guy. And now he's working for us. And they keep doing that. Because if you get trained on the corporate dime, on the boring corporate stuff, and then one day, can you imagine you've been doing all of this stuff with Hyperledger and distributed ledger technology, et cetera, and you've been paid and trained and trained and trained, and one day you come across Bitcoin, and it blows your mind. Because it blew my mind and it blew your mind. We're all here because we had that epiphany. We had that same experience. That, oh, wow, this is very different. It's exciting. It's weird. And then you get involved and you start reading and you go down the rabbit hole. So we're going to keep seeing that happening. And I think that's one of the most exciting parts of this space. Let's do one more question.
Yeah, the last one.
Last question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm not a programmer, so but I just recently grasped the idea of Lightning Network, like how it works, more or less.
Yes.
And then I learned, I don't know if we can, well, yeah, we can say about, even if it's a Bitcoin Congress, about the plasma cache, right?
About the what?
About the plasma cache.
Okay.
Yeah, in Ethereum.
I haven't heard that.
No, in Ethereum, no.
Oh, is that Raiden? Oh, maybe.
I've heard plasma cache. That
okay.
They basically want to do, from what I understand, is that they want to do something like Lightning Network, but on-chain.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah,
well,
like baby chains or something like that. You know, the concept of baby chains with the main Ethereum chains. Do you know anything about that? Or
I do not.
No,
I had
right.
heard of Raiden, which is another implementation of a Lightning-like protocol. Lightning today means more or less a specific implementation, which is the Bolt specification. So the Lightning Network is a set of specifications called Bolt. But if you take the more general term, which is to say a system of second layer routable state channels, that concept can be done in many, many different ways. And we're only barely discovering all of the different ways it can be done. So side chains and cross-chain atomic swaps and internetworking protocols and, I mean, great. As I said, it never gets old. Just when you think you understand some of this space, something weird happens, and you discover a whole new area that you didn't know existed. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about my job. It's never boring. And I can tell you, I am not finished learning. The day I finish learning, I'm going to do something else, because then it will be boring. But right now, every single day, somebody comes to me and says, have you heard of blah? And I go, no. Never heard of it. Brand new. Thank you. So thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate your time. If you wanted to get a book signed, or if you want to take a photo or something, we will set up some time for that after this presentation. But most importantly, thank you so much for coming to this event and for hosting me. Thank you.
Andreas Antonopoulos. Gość specjalny, drodzy Państwo.